Can I first of all just update the community in regard to the last 24-hour period up until 8 p.m. last night. To 8 p.m. last night, we had 9 new cases of COVID-19. That takes us to 2,863 cases. In the 24 hours to 8 p.m, there were 2,603 tests undertaken, and obviously that's quite a substantial increase. As we talked about yesterday, over Easter, there were, the day before yesterday, only 840 cases. So I want to thank the community who have been tested, but also the nurses, doctors and pathology staff who have undertaken those extra tests. The fact that we had 9 new cases clearly indicates that we're moving in the right direction, but we still have a lot more to do. And no one should think that we can slacken off in the efforts that we're trying to undertake at the moment as a community, as a government, to keep our community here in New South Wales safe. The tests to date, a remarkable number. Across our state we've had 144,380 tests undertaken, and that certainly is far more than any other state or territory. In fact, it's closing in on half of all the tests that have been done across the country. Sadly, we've had 2 more deaths. A 74-year-old lady who passed away in John Hunter Hospital, and a 76-year-old gentleman who passed away in Northern Beaches Hospital. And I think, again, particularly at this time of the year, but any time, when you lose a family member, it changes your life forever. So to the families of those 2 people, we all express our very, very great sympathy, and our thoughts are with you. That takes us to 26 deaths in New South Wales. Can I say there's a focus for the New South Wales Health Ministry, and that is to increase the number of tests. Yesterday there was some discussions, which I'll leave to Dr. Selvey to talk about in detail, but it was aimed with the local health districts across local government areas at increasing testing in particular areas, and I'll leave that to her to explain. In terms of the number of people who are currently in our ICUs, we have 30 people in our ICUs at the current time, our intensive care units, and 21 of those are ventilated. So they're on ventilators, and obviously their condition is quite serious. I want to give a very clear message today to staff in aged care facilities, staff in any facility where there are vulnerable people. We've talked about this numerous times, but now it appears that some staff are still going to work even when they have symptoms, flu-like symptoms, just being sick. Simple message here is, if you're working in an aged care facility, you are working with some of the most vulnerable people in our community. Please don't go to work if you're feeling sick. Just don't go. Make sure your boss knows you're not coming in because you're sick. We've had another situation now where at an aged care facility in Caddens, here in Sydney, the Newmarch House aged care facility, there was a healthcare worker who went to work for 6 days, 6 straight days, when she was already feeling sick, when she had some symptoms of an illness. We won't go into the details other than to say she had symptoms of illness. Now, no doubt she thought she was doing the right thing. She was unfortunately not doing the right thing, and the message for all of us is, don't go to work. If you're feeling sick and you're working in an aged care facility, you're working with some of the most vulnerable people in our state, please don't go to work. There will be, unfortunately, the potential is disastrous consequences if you're working with some of our most vulnerable people. And I'll leave it at that, and happy to take questions on those matters after each of my colleagues have spoken. But first of all, I'm going to ask Dr. Selvey to give us any more information on some of those matters. Dr. Selvey.
So the main message from me today is that yesterday we met with staff from all of the local health districts, and we identified some new areas where we want to make sure that there's a large amount of testing happening. So these are areas where there have been a few cases with people where we are unable to find out where they got their infection from, and some other areas where we concerned that if the spread of the virus was occurring, we would certainly want to know about that everywhere. So in order to really be sure that we're not having widespread community transmission in these areas, we're asking that everyone in these areas, if they have even very mild symptoms, to present to their GP or to one of the COVID clinics or to a hospital and seek testing. So those areas are, there's some areas in Western Sydney, so Penrith, local government area, Liverpool, Blactown, Cumberland and the Westmead areas. Also people in the inner west of Sydney, in eastern Sydney, in Waverley, Woollahra and Randwick, and also in Ryde in the northern Sydney LHD. And we're continuing to have the same messages for people in Manning and in Lake Macquarie area in Newcastle. So again, particularly emphasise on testing in those areas because we want to make sure that if community transmission is happening, that we are able to know that and that people with COVID are identified early and their contacts traced to interrupt any more spread of the virus in those areas. That's them.
Deputy Commissioner Walmart.
Thank you, Doctor. Ministers, Treasurer. 58 infringement notices, that's the $1,000 infringement notice, were issued in the last 24 hours. The vast majority of those being for people away from their normal place of residence, their home. Again, large numbers, but I would also suggest that there are a vast majority of people right across this state are doing the right thing. The police are out there, they're asking questions, they're stopping motor vehicles, and here again we have 58 infringement notices issued to people who were contrary to public health orders and the expectations of the community. I'd also, I think is very important in relation to the spitting and coughing legislation that's now only days old. There was an incident in the Blue Mountains which we think was not COVID related, it was a mental health episode, but in particular there's also an incident at Port Stephens in the Hunter where an elderly couple, married couple, were out walking, exercising in the afternoon, and a motor vehicle, a white Nissan Navara, pulled up alongside of them. A passenger leant out of the window and coughed at these two elderly people, causing them a great deal of distress. They laughed inside the vehicle and drove off. The police have the number of that vehicle. They're also looking for some CCTV. Inquiries were made last night, but it's pretty clear that if you're in this vehicle, if you're the owner of the car, it's a local vehicle, we know where the car is registered to, you best today get yourself down to the police station and sort this matter out. Police also continue with their operation of repatriation from hotels in Sydney. That's the 14-day isolation when people come through the airport. Another 800 people today will be moved from those hotels to their homes, whether that's here or interstate. That operation will continue each day. We have roughly 250 people joining us through the airport and into those hotels. So that operation is ongoing, and I'll take questions after. Thank you.
Well, today the New South Wales Government is announcing a $440 million package to provide land tax relief for landlords who provide rental relief for their tenants. This package now takes a total contribution of the New South Wales Government as close to $10 billion. And from a commercial side of things, our focus here in New South Wales has been to keep people in jobs and businesses in business. And this announcement today goes to the heart of that. This policy is about protection, protecting tenants from being evicted due to circumstances outside their control. It protects landlords from tenants in circumstances where payment of rent is not being paid when it should be paid. And these measures today go to the heart of that. I'd make the point that what is really important here is for landlords and tenants to be sitting down together and negotiating an agreement through this phase. And it's pleasing to note that right across the board, this has already been happening at both a commercial, retail and residential level. The reality is, the more that a landlord looks after their tenant, and the more that a tenant works with their landlord, the better off that both will be as we move through this pandemic. So today's announcement will provide a 25% rebate or waiver for landlords who pass on an equivalent amount of rental relief for their tenants. We will also be deferring land tax for the next 3 months for those who have yet to pay their land tax bill for this year. This policy today is not occurring in isolation. It's complementary to the federal government, whether it's their JobKeeper and their JobSeeker packages that they have announced, and we continue to work very closely with them in respect of where gaps appear, where governments can come in to support them. We saw that last week, particularly with the childcare support which we provided here at a state level for both childcare and preschool fees. In addition, we've also provided significant support when it comes to the waiving and deferral of payroll tax for small businesses, a range of other taxes as well, and the $10,000 payment we announced just last week for small businesses who don't qualify paying for payroll tax who were affected by COVID-19. So all of these packages work together. As I said, this takes the total support of the New South Wales Government to close to $10 billion for those businesses and communities who are affected by COVID-19. I finally want to make the point that for those tenants whose circumstances have not changed, their obligations have not changed as well, and they are still required to pay rent during this period of time. I'd now like to pass to Minister Tudehope, who will speak in relation to the commercial and residential tenancy side of things, and then to Minister Anderson, who will speak to the residential tenancy side.
Thank you, Treasurer. And the announcement today is probably something that small businesses have been looking for a while, although they've already been in the process of negotiating with landlords, as the Treasurer expressed. However, getting a framework for the purposes of negotiation is one of the most important components to give comfort to businesses that they reach the other side. One of the things that the Prime Minister has been saying as part of this whole package and his negotiations in relation to it with the National Cabinet is we've got to get to the other side. And to get to the other side is to make sure that businesses can reopen when the pandemic is over or starting to be, the processes or the restrictions are starting to be lifted. So what we are announcing today is that we want to help businesses get through this period by mediating their rental situation. And if you're a business which has been impacted by the COVID crisis, we want you to be able to have a framework against which you can negotiate an outcome. An outcome to be able to say, I will be able to open. So one of the chief emphases of this package is mediation. And a component of the package is a contribution of some $10 million to the Office of Small Business for the purposes of employing additional mediators to help landlords and tenants negotiate an outcome where they haven't been able to do that themselves. My experience to date has been, and the reports that I get to date, is that the majority of landlords and tenants are in fact negotiating new arrangements themselves. But where they can't reach that agreement themselves, then we are wanting them to be able to mediate that solution through the Office of Small Business. One final thing that I want to just say is this. For small businesses, there are lots of announcements that they're coping with at the moment, whether it's JobKeeper, JobSeeker, and today's announcements. There are lots of things in your space, and the temptation is to freeze in the moment. And what I encourage people to do is for those businesses in respect of whom were eligible for grants of $10,000, use a component of that grant to get advice. Get advice about what's available to you, how do I in fact approach Service New South Wales or the Office of Small Business, or my landlord or my suppliers or my bank. It's so important at this time to get that level of advice so that you can know where you can be so as to get to the other side. So this announcement today is really important for small businesses in their journey to the other side of this crisis.
Well, today's package of assistance and support measures will go a long way to supporting tenants. We want them to know that they are not alone when they are suffering from COVID-19. Today's package of assistance and support also comes with clear guidelines about what to do and how to start that negotiation process. The package includes a 6-month eviction on rent arrears for tenants who are COVID-19 impacted, as well as a 60-day stop on termination notices by landlords to tenants, as well as there will be the formal negotiation process that tenants and landlords will need to engage to get to an agreed position. So it's about negotiation, mediation and arbitration. If they cannot get to an agreed position, then the tenants and landlords will then go through to the tribunal, who will then make an order and take into consideration the vulnerability of tenants and their specific situation. In addition to that, $2.3 million will be given to the Tenants' Union of New South Wales to immediately resource them to answer questions and support tenants when they have those Q&As to provide them with information they need. What we want to do is let tenants know that they are supported, but also for landlords too. They don't want to lose their tenants, as well as tenants who want to stay where they are, where they can. For landlords, we're thinking about the mums and dads who, as self-funded retirees, that's their only source of income. So we need to be able to negotiate, whether it be through the tenants or whether it be through landlords, through fair trading, who will in the first instance help mediate. If they cannot agree, then through to NCAT, who will make an order. So this is about making sure that we're supported. On Fair Trading's website, there is a template for tenants to start that negotiation process. Some might not know how to start that. So this template will clearly set the guidelines for them to start that process. So wherever possible, we want to see that people negotiate, that people are looked after, and there's never been a better time to start that negotiation process from today. We want to see that people will get the best result possible and reach an agreement that will suit all parties. I'll now hand back to the Minister for Health.
Thanks very much, folks. So you can direct questions to any one of the ministers here, or obviously the Deputy Commissioner or Dr. Christine Selvey.
Just purely means that aged care worker will get to work and that the aged care facility can pick it up for 6 days.
I think it's difficult to cast blame in that sense because no one is certain yet what those symptoms were. So I think we should leave that to be sorted through. But the very clear message is if you're feeling sick, even if you don't have symptoms, don't go to work. Don't go to work. Sorry.
A lot of families are being locked out of aged care facilities. I don't feel with a lot of confidence and a lot of families are being nervous about this.
I must say, if I had, I don't have my mum and dad anymore, but if they were in an aged care facility and it was in lockdown, I would want to know that the aged care facility was taking every possible step to keep them safe. And so the message here is to aged care facilities, you need to step up and make sure that your staff understand the message, but also the staff need to understand you've chosen this very honourable profession to work with our older citizens who are very vulnerable. Please listen to the health message. Don't go to work if you're feeling sick. Pretty simple. Sorry. Sorry? Yes. Confirmed. Yeah.
The latest 2 deaths in New South Wales, are they linked to the root process?
I'll ask Dr. Selvey to answer that in a minute. Is there any other questions to me before I step back? Okay, Dr. Selvey.
I'd like to express my condolences to the families of both those 2 people who died yesterday from COVID. One was a 74-year-old woman who died in the John Hunter Hospital, and the other was a 79-year-old man who died in the Northern Beaches Hospital. Both of those people were passengers on the Ruby Princess cruise, and I'd just like to emphasise that the passengers all acquired their infection whilst on board the ship.
Can you just clarify, sorry, the age of
Yeah, so the male was 79.
How many of the crew members on board that ship have currently tested positive for COVID-19?
So at the moment there are 66 crew members who've tested positive. I'd like to emphasise that some of those people are already very close to recover or just recovering. So their infections have been spread out over a few weeks, but they've just been tested recently, which is why the numbers have gone up so high. So I have heard some requests that everybody on the ship should be tested. That's not a good strategy for a couple of reasons. First of all, it won't change the way that anyone's being managed on the ship or that the way the outbreak's being managed on the ship. And secondly, testing everybody doesn't identify everybody who might be infected. So that's because soon after infection, the tests are negative during the period, the incubation period, which is the time from when someone gets the virus to when they develop symptoms. So they will only test positive close at the time of symptoms or just before it.
Dr. Selvey, the NRL has flagged its intention to bring more responsibility from your expert.
So I can't comment on the NRL.
We should leave that to Dr. Chant, actually. Tomorrow.
And I think it depends on how that will be done.
As I've said in the past, the NRL made the choice, as has every other sport worldwide, to cease playing the game. Obviously, there are work health and safety issues that have to be considered, and that's for them to work through. I think that it's fair to say that we'd all love to see the league back playing. As I said a couple of days ago, I'm looking forward to Manly winning this season if it starts. But the problem for NRL is it does have to make sure that it is keeping its players safe, keeping everybody safe, and complying with the public.
We seem to have lost that media conference there by then.
Who was patient zero on the review process?
Have I?
Or has New South Wales now figured out who was patient zero?
I don't think, well, I think we'll ask Dr. Chant that tomorrow when she's back on deck, but I don't believe so.
In terms of the plannings with our chip, obviously they come out of their 10-day isolation on Wednesday. We're now hearing that perhaps they're not going to be from charter flights, that they're actually all going to sail away. Is that what your understanding is?
Look, the ship is obviously being managed by Aspen Medical, but oversighted by the police, and particularly Commissioner Fuller in his capacity as the COVID-19 Commissioner. And I understand that he's also doing a press conference today. I'm not sure of the time, but I think those questions should be directed to him. He's obviously far more aware of all those issues than we are.
Minister, when would you expect...
James. Yep.
When would you expect an inquiry into the actions of the review process to be launched by the government?
The review is currently underway, and again, you should be talking to the Commissioner.
No, I'm talking about a separate inquiry that Gladys Berejiklian foreshadowed when she said that alongside the criminal investigation, a full inquiry should happen.
There is a full inquiry being undertaken now because the coroner is looking at those issues, and that would be looking at both issues. I think that it's obviously necessary from a health point of view. We always look at these issues if there's an incident, but from any public inquiry point of view, the coroner's in charge now in terms of that.
Just back on the NRL, it's not helpful that the Australian Health Outline so strongly to push into the person that helped to get the NRL back running.
Look, I think John is a Deputy Premier and he's entitled to his views. He's a good colleague. I value what he has to say, and he's a good mate. He's keen to see the league back on deck, but as Health Minister, obviously I have to just remind everybody that there are work health and safety issues and health issues. So I'm sure NRL, a very mature organisation, will work through these issues in due course.
Minister, do you know why, it might sound silly, why are there so many deaths from the review process as opposed to other cruise ships that also have the virus? There is a very high number of deaths in relation to that ship.
I think we need to direct that to the Chief Health Officer rather than me. I mean, it's clearly there has been very close proximity in that ship. And who was it that caused it is still, I think the jury's well and truly out on that, in the sense of who brought it onto the ship. The New Zealand government struggling with that as well, trying to come to grips with it. It's a very challenging issue for the medical people to actually track down the original source. I do know that the Chief Health Officer has said if the ship had stayed alongside for much longer, then certainly there could have been a lot more people who were infected. So I think that's an issue for you to direct to the Chief Health Officer when she's back on deck.
When you say stayed alongside,
the day that the ship came in, there have obviously been a lot of discussions publicly about what should or shouldn't have happened. And the Chief Health Officer's view has certainly been that if the ship had stayed alongside for any length of time, there could have been a lot more people infected, and it could have been an even worse outcome. So it's a very, very, very unfortunate outcome. But at the time that ship sailed, which I think was the 8th of March from memory, there was COVID well and truly, because I know that all of us were doing, you as journalists were talking about it, I as Health Minister was working very hard on it. And it's just unfortunate that people actually still were going out cruising at that particular point. Yeah, sorry, Ash. What are you going to say? Lisa?
There were more than 900 international passengers on board the ship. Do you know if any of those who since returned to their own countries have died or contracted?
Yes, I've really got to leave that to the health authorities. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know.
But did New South Wales Health email them or ask them for health updates?
One of the things that New South Wales Health had done, which was beyond the federal protocols, was it asked Carnival to provide emails and phone numbers. So I understand, I was advised from them that all of them were emailed, all of them were phoned, but I'm not sure of the details that you're asking in terms of total numbers. Sorry, Liz.
Oh, you're not sure of how many came back and said that they...
Yeah, I'm not sure.
But you would assume that there are some overseas travellers that it didn't just infect the Australians.
I can't assume anything. I'm a health minister. I think I'll take health advice. Whilst you might want me to, I'm not going to. James.
Do you know the number of people that have caught coronavirus across the country from...
No, I don't. We have only line of sight on the New South Wales ones at the moment, so no, we don't. Does anybody want to ask about our magnificent $440 million package? The Treasurer? Oh, good. Good. Go on, Brad.
In terms of the new border regulations that the Premier signed off on at National Cabinet, do you concede that meant New South Wales Health did have ultimate discretion for the docking of restrictions?
I'm not going to be commenting any further than I already have because there's an investigation underway, and I think that's appropriate. No minister should be now expressing views that would bias the outcome of that, so I'm not going to do that.
Do you concede that New South Wales Health had enough information that coronavirus was something that the ship across the dock?
As I said, I'm not commenting on any further. There's an investigation underway. I'll say again, there were 4 very senior public health officials who, on information that was given to them, made a decision, and they had all been making those sorts of decisions for somewhere between 10 and 30 years. So I think we could be satisfied that we had the best of the best making the decision. But I also, having been the minister during this period since that's, well, for 3.5 years, but I well recollect when all this started in the beginning of January, it moved slowly. By the time February came along, it was moving far faster. By the time March came, it was moving even faster. So I think some of the things can be looked at now with the benefit of hindsight, but you know what? It'll be all looked at by the coroner and by the police in an appropriate time, and I think I welcome that. Now, I'm going to let the Treasurer have a go, and then if you still want me, I'll come back, but let's not stay here all day. Let the Treasurer, has anybody got any questions for the Treasurer?
You go there. What happens to tenants down the track if they can't pay? Because I understand that rent still accrues.
Well, as we said, the key focus here for us is to get landlords and tenants sitting down together and negotiating a relevant outcome. That is, well, in certain circumstances, particularly on a commercial basis, based on the national code that's occurred, that if there's a reduction in turnover of a certain amount, then there needs to be a proportionate reduction in rent from the landlord to cover that. On the basis of residential, we ask landlords to work through with their tenants over this period of time, and where tenants have not been affected by COVID-19, then their obligations to pay rent remain in place, and we will work through these issues as they see fit. But the reality is as a result of this decision today, that no tenant can be evicted over the next 6 months simply because of being in rental arrears. And the other point I would make as well, for real estate agents that have marks against tenants' names who fall behind in rental arrears, that those marks will not be put against that tenant's name in circumstances where they have fallen into rental arrears over the next 6 months. Yes, so the land tax threshold is $732,000 here in New South Wales. So for those who are liable for land tax, that if they provide a reduction to their tenants, then we will provide a waiver or a rebate of land tax in those circumstances. And also, I think the other important point to make is that land tax obligations will also be deferred for the next 3 months in circumstance where we have a business that's affected by COVID-19, and that will provide an opportunity for landlords to work through these issues with the tenants over this period of time.
Why don't you go down the path of rentals? Because there are going to be some tenants who lost their jobs and simply can't pay even without rental reduction. So why not do that?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's a fair question actually, and what we've tried to do through the course of all of these packages is make sure that every measure we take is complementary both to the federal government's measures and also our other state government measures. So there is the JobKeeper and the Job Seeker payments available to people right across the state, to businesses right across the state. We've also provided small business support for those businesses that don't pay payroll tax who have been impacted by COVID-19. And as well, we've waived and deferred payroll tax as well. So it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. These measures can't be looked at in isolation. We know that support needs to be provided right across the board, and gaps will appear. This is not a precise science. We will work through these issues as we see fit, and as issues arise, we will deal with them at both a Commonwealth and state level. And I want to particularly make the point of thanking my state treasurer counterparts who have all worked across political lines together to arrive at some packages which we believe will provide support in this space. We have limited levers available to us. The levers that we have, we will use. Land tax is one of those, and that now takes the measures of the New South Wales government to close to $10 billion in support.
What about the clarity around the 60-day moratorium, just in terms of eviction
I mean, Minister Anderson might want to provide some support, but the reality is you cannot. There is a stop on evictions for 60 days, and there is a moratorium on evictions for rental arrears for 6 months. Now, what we would say is that tenants need to work with landlords in relation to renegotiating their arrangements in circumstances where evidence can be provided of that with respect of an amended rental agreement. That can be lodged with Revenue New South Wales, and what we will do is provide a relevant land tax rebate, if applicable, to the landlord. In circumstances where a mediation is unable to be reached, then we can go through the arbitration process through NCAP.
How is the landlord any better off if they only get land tax relief if they pass on? So they're only getting relief on the land tax if they pass on a rental.
Yeah, that's right.
So
I see your question.
The person in the middle doesn't end up any better off.
Yeah, so the landlord obviously has access to finance through the banks, and that's why I said in terms of all these packages, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. It is very difficult to do that. This is an area with a lot of complexity, a lot of players at stake, and what we're trying to do is ease the pressure as much as possible. We are seeing many retailers who have closed or have had a significant reduction in their business, and in circumstances and in collaboration with the federal government support, so that the JobKeeper payment is available and the turnover is being reduced by 30%, in those circumstances as a result of the national code, a reduction in rent is payable proportionate to the reduction in revenue. So what we're saying from a state level, based on the lever available to us, any land tax payable, 25% rebate will be provided, or a 25% waiver and a deferral for 3 months. So that will support the landlords based on the rental reduction that in many circumstances they will receive over the course of this period of time. I want to make the point that this is about common sense, courage and compassion. The more we look after others, the better our state will get through this pandemic.
What percentage of landlords pay land?
So on a residential basis, we're talking about 20%. And as I have been stressing, This is not a one-size-fits-all approach. There are numerous measures that the New South Wales Government and the Commonwealth governments have released which provide support for people to get through this time. Whether that's the JobKeeper payment, the Job Seeker payment, which will help many people in the tenancy situation, whether it's our $10,000 grants to small businesses who are not eligible for payroll tax or are COVID affected. What you can't do in relation to this situation is say, well, this package doesn't cover the field. No package in these circumstances will cover the field. What is most important is that states and the Commonwealth work together to provide support where it's needed. That's exactly what we have done with this package. And the reality is the land tax rebate will, in most circumstances, not cover the entire rental reduction. But what it does is provide support for landlords on a leave the New South Wales Government has to the tune of $440 million. And if we can do more, we will do more, and it's important we work through this process. As I said, it's not a precise science. Different challenges will come up, and we will continue to address them as they do. Yeah, listen. Yeah. Yes. Well, the point I'd make there is that the New South Wales Government remains committed to its infrastructure agenda. Close to $100 billion of infrastructure investment over the next 4 years. And let's not forget that New South Wales goes into this pandemic in a very strong economic position, and that has been largely held up by our infrastructure investment. Construction and infrastructure has been the foundation of our success here in New South Wales, and our public investment has added about half percentage point to our economic growth each year. So that's a positive position that we are in, and that's why we remain completely committed to our infrastructure agenda here in New South Wales. In relation to our focus, well, we continue to focus on projects and we'll bring forward projects that are shovel-ready, screwdriver-ready. We want to make sure that we keep people in jobs and business in business, and we will identify projects across the board that are ready to go, that might be down the track in a few years that we can get off the ground immediately. It might be schools programs, right across the board. We remain open to looking at where are the opportunities for the New South Wales Government to invest in infrastructure that will stimulate jobs growth and economic growth immediately, and we're having more to say about that soon.